Yo, what is up everyone, back here with another video. In today's video we are going to be doing a tier list where pretty much we do the updated version of the tier list where we break down all the current threats, Pokemon that are in the format right now. I talk about how good I think they are, you know, how they function, all that stuff. If you guys enjoy the content, please be sure to let me know down below and let me know what you guys would like to see next. Make sure to check out Patreon if you guys would like to support me beyond YouTube. And also make sure to check out Twitch, where I stream pretty much live every time there's a tournament. And also make sure to join Discord, where I do post about tournaments. I post about, you know, VGC stuff in there, when videos are up, all that stuff. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So what I want to do is quickly touch on each category that I've already filled out. First we have the not legal category. Obviously these are Pokemon that are not allowed, so there is no need to like go over them on their own right now, because there's no, you can't use them. Okay, so in the wouldn't recommend category, these are Pokemon I really just felt weren't worth talking about. They're just not good. And basically that comes from a combination of stats, you know, from either like weak abilities. They're just not like super strong Pokemon, right? Like they just don't offer you very much. And to be honest, like there's not really any worth going over here. Like a big emphasis of this channel is being very direct and useful knowledge, and I feel like if I'm going over these Pokemon individually, it's very disingenuous to your time, because I don't feel like they're worth talking about. What I am going to do, there is a barely usable tier, and this tier I am going to give you guys a little bit of information on, just so you have the context, as well too. Some of these Pokemon can be used like maybe on one specific team. So for that, I'll give you guys a bit of context. So I'm going to go through the top row, just because those are Pokemon that I feel like are actually really like potentially useful. So Rotom Frost. Rotom Frost is it's a Rotom form, so like it's always gonna be okay-ish, right? It's just the weakest type out of all of them, besides Rotom Fan, which is all the way on the bottom. Rotom Fan is not something I'm gonna talk about. It's just barely usable because it's still Rotom. But like Rotom Frost is actually almost on the next tier, because Rotom Frost actually you get access to Blizzard, and it's like one of the only good Hail teams. Actually, so you know what? We'll put Rotom here. But like basically Rotom is like one of the only like good Rotoms that work on like a specific kind of archetype, that are like the niche type outside of like Rotom Mow, Rotom Wash, and Rotom Heat. Can go for Blizzards next to Abomasnow. You can maybe, you know, get some strong electric moves off. It's just like a kind of cute niche. Arboliva actually has a really high special attack stat, and it also has a really cool ability where basically it sets grassy terrain when it gets hit. Because of its high special attack combined with grassy terrain, I could actually see this thing being pretty potent in certain situations. Note, in certain situations, not in most. But I could see being good in certain situations. So to me, I think it's like worth at least bringing up. Hatterene. I just want to talk about it just because, so you guys understand why it's so low. At this point, it's just completely outclassed as a Trick Room user, and losing Expanding Force was just like nail in the coffin for it. There's really no reason to use Hatterene over like another partner at this point. There's just like very little benefit. Goldango's everywhere, so you're just gonna get, you know, Specs Make It Rain through redirection. Like, it's just not a good Pokemon right now. It's too weak to current metagame. Slowbro and Slowking I actually want to talk about, because I feel like those two might actually have like a niche on a specific team, especially next to Redirector. Especially if you can go for like, you know, especially if you can go for like a Trick Room and like you're not pressured by like Goldango, you know, Make It Rain, or like a Hydreigon like Heat Wave combination. That's actually pretty good in this metagame right now. So Slowking, Slowbro could potentially be good. Plus Slowbro gets Iron Defense Body Press, so not always terrible. Tinkaton I just want to talk about because I know it's a very popular Pokemon, and I know that a lot of people like it and want to make it work. Guys, I think Tinkaton is really, really not great, and you're putting yourself at a disservice if you're using it. I know there are some YouTubers and other people who will tell you, oh yeah, Tinkaton's cool because it gets a hammer. They gave it the worst possible stats imaginable. Like, this thing has some really bad stats, man, and that holds it back substantially, right? Essentially the main reason why it's an issue is just you have a Pokemon that basically they were too scared to make it good, is the way I would describe it. So like if you're Jolly Nature, which is like a fine speed for the format, right? Like this is a decent speed. You have to have 127 whole attack stat. Like that's really weak. And you can make it immune to Intimidate with own tempo as well, where it can be confused too. You could do Mold Breaker if you really want to, but it's just not good, because once you use Gigaton Hammer, and sure you have like Fake Out or Knock Off, you know, Protect and Play Rough, it's just not a consistent enough option to really like give you the tools that you need to, you know, to win. And I just feel like overall it's a very lackluster Pokemon because of that. All right. So continuing down. Hariyama. So Hariyama is actually a Pokemon that I could see working on specific teams. My only problem with it is like, so when we lost Iron Hands, people were like, oh yeah, Hariyama becomes really good. But Hariyama still like kind of sucks a little bit. I don't think people realize how bad power creep like actually messed it up. It has some pretty bad stats, all things considered. Like, not bad, but like they're pretty like mid, you know. Even though you have a really high attack stat, really high HP stat, like you are losing a lot in your special defense and defense. And like what Iron Hands really fixed about Hariyama was that like it had a better defense stat, so that, you know, you could be stronger. But like Hariyama literally has a base stat total of like 474. It's a really bad Pokemon. So I think that like, or it's a really bad Pokemon like in concept for like the stats it has, you know. But it does have some decent tools like Fake Out, Wide Guard, you know, close combat with guts, boosted, you know, close combat. Like it's not unusable, you know, and it can work on like certain teams. It's usually seen on Trick Room. But, you know, like being trapped on those kind of teams isn't always a good thing, because usually Trick Room teams are trapping like the mons that normally would be bad, but like because of Trick Room, like have a niche. Breloom is a Pokemon that I think is like consistent on some teams. So typically these are like, this is a Pokemon that I would see being consistent on like Tailwind teams. Breloom's actually a really cool option for that. It has Fast Spore with Tailwind. It's pretty much outspeeding everything. And also too, you have Rock Tomb, Mach Punch, and Bullet Seed, which is really good coverage into the metagame. You can hit a lot of different Pokemon with that. And then Fast Spore obviously is just a really good tool. Breloom in general to me is just a Pokemon that I think like has a, like if you're using it on like a Tailwind team, like has a decent amount of potential to like do well. Grimmsnarl. So Grimmsnarl to me probably goes into the consistent on some teams. So I would say argue that screens are like less functional right now than like other kinds of archetypes. So screens is good. It's just that like you're not using it on a ton of teams. Whereas like with other, you know, with other Pokemon like Murkrow, for example, like that's going to be consistent on most teams because it's a Murkrow. Most teams are like Tailwind offense, you know, in the format right now. So it kind of fits well, you know. But yeah, anyways, so Colossal to me goes into the, it's like in the barely usable tier. So like, I wanted to specifically just go over Colossal because every time we always have the, is Colossal good? Is Colossal bad kind of thing. Colossal's not really phenomenal in my opinion, and it's really held back because it needed Dynamax to like be super good with its ability. It's pretty trashy. Like if you're using this thing, you might be like down bad a little bit, like coping, but like coping for the Gmax Colossal, because the problem with Colossal is that you're just like overall weak base stats. Even if you proc its Steam Engine, it really needed the extra power that Dynamax or Gmax moves gave it to like really be good, right? Like this special attack is not very impressive when you actually stack it up. So I would say that's the main issue there, you know. So like yeah, that's kind of just how I feel about Colossal. Not amazing. All right, so Indeedee, count this as Indeedee because Indeedee is actually the Pokemon I wanted, but I don't, for some reason I can't like get the spray for it. Basically here, right? Indeedee is just a really good like follow me mon. It's just really good helping hand, and it also gets access to Trick Room now, so it actually like has a bit more use. I'd probably put it a little bit like around the, like I put it above Breloom because it's definitely like more useful than Breloom is in a vacuum, right? But this get Trick Room now, so that is kind of strong. And Indeedee, like F having Trick Room, like we thought it was a glitch, but like apparently it actually is legit, unless they do something about that. So yeah, I mean Indeedee F is like pretty solid now that gets Trick Room. So Gallade is a Pokemon that I would say could work on specific teams. So there was a rank 1 team made by David Kutesh that actually did end up getting rank 1 with Gallade. Notably, that team did have a weaker, you know, Trick Room matchup, which was something that was discussed by the creator of the team, and like they wanted to change the Gallade specifically for that. I don't know if they wanted to change a slot or they wanted to change them on. Gallade is okay. I wouldn't say it's phenomenal, and I wouldn't say that it's consistent on even some teams. I'd say it worked on that specific team, and the main like thing that it gets is like sharpness. Sharpness Sacred Sword and Sharpness Psycho Cut, which is like really powerful. It's a 1.5 power boost. It did do well in Limitless, or it did well enough, I think, considering it was a Gallade. So I would probably say that it's like, it's okay. You know, it's fine. It works on the specific team that it was used on. But notably, it only had uses on that specific team that did really well at the tournament. So, yeah. Gothitelle. So Gothitelle is a Pokemon I could see work on specific teams, but also I could consider putting it down in like barely usable. The main issue that Gothitelle has is it's just like really underpowered this format, and just sitting there doing nothing is like really bad, especially in a format where like the prioritization has always been on like damage, right? So that's a big issue that Gothitelle has. Now I wouldn't say that like it's completely unusable. It's just like you need a really good team that supports it, and if you're building a team around supporting Gothitelle, you could argue too that like then it's not really that useful as a support, right? Because usually the supports on your team are supposed to flesh out your team and like make your team like better into certain things, and like if Gothitelle needs to be built around, then like it's kind of, you know, at a disadvantage. Mudsdale is a Pokemon that I'd say probably could be consistent on some teams. I actually think it's a little underutilized right now. I think it's a really strong Pokemon. It actually does a lot of damage. It's the second best ground type in the format, second to Garchomp. So, you know, that's obviously like an important role to have usually in these metagames. Also too, like, you know, it gets Heavy Slam, which chunks Grims. You know, it has high horsepower, which chunks a lot of ground weaks. Gets close combat. It gets Rock Slide. Like, there's just a lot it can do. So I could definitely see Mudsdale being a Pokemon that like would be solid. Right. Meowscarada is a Pokemon that I would put in consistent on some teams, but like at the top level of it. So Meowscarada is good, right? Like Meowscarada for sure is a good Pokemon. I think that, does it mean that it's a, you know, like does this mean that it's like not a consistent threat? I'd probably say like it's just because people haven't fully figured out the compositions for it yet. But I do think Meowscarada will be a consistent, like, excuse me, good Pokemon. I woke up a little bit ago. Good Pokemon, right? And basically the main reason why it's a solid option is because of its Sash combined with its Overgrow set, which sounds weird because normally the starter abilities are not good. But it's like a perfect Sash Pokemon, so when you give it Overgrow and then it terrestrializes into a Grass type with a 70 power guaranteed crit Grass move, it's really strong, and it's one-shotting most things in the metagame. Like, it cleanly knocks out Garchomp. So it's pretty strong. It's pretty potent. It's a Pokemon that you gotta respect in Team Preview for sure. I'd maybe consider putting up Grim to consist on most teams, but we'll see as we continue on. Dondozo Tatsugiri, I'd say, is consistent on most teams. So like basically a lot of teams have a Dondozo Tatsugiri pocket mode right now. It's a good pair. I think because of most of the checks being lost to it, with Paradox being removed, and like some other Pokemon being removed to balance it out, Dondozo Tatsugiri is pretty solid. The main issue that it has is just that like if someone has a dedicated check for it, you run the risk of just being like heavily C-teamed almost. Not like C-teamed, but like being in a bad position if you try and set it up and like you don't know that your opponent has checks to it. So, you know, there's some creative things coming up in the metagame to beat it. Haze is the most popular one. There's also just like Clear Smog, but you can technically Terra type around that. And then Unaware stuff, like Unaware Skeledirge, for example, is like one Pokemon that does that. But you have to be really careful with Haze Pokemon with this strategy because you could get punished pretty hard. Speaking of Haze Pokemon, Murkrow is actually one of those. I'd say Murkrow right now is consistent on most teams. The main reasoning why is because it just offers like really good priority Tailwind. It's the best Prankstermon in the format right now. Good Tailwind, you know, you have Haze to clean your stats when you're paired with a Goldango or a Hydreigon. And then you also have Foul Play to like really chunk down physical attackers. There's just a lot it can do. You know, Taunt also shuts down a bunch of support Pokemon. I think that Murkrow actually has a lot of potential in this format. We'll continue to see like its success. I just think that what players are going to have to do is like adapt it for different Pokemon eventually on Tailwind offense once like they find like people find a team to like deal with the current Tailwind offense team. Titan. Oh, I grabbed Rotom Wash. Titan. So Titan to me is like it could work on specific teams, specifically Snow. I do think that it's an otherwise underwhelming Pokemon, but I think it does have the potential to work on like some Snow teams. Annihilate to me is a Pokemon that I would say is consistent on most teams. It could be consistent on some teams as well. But basically, Annihilate has two really good sets that make it super strong. First one being Choice Scarf with Rage Fist, Final Gambit, Close Combat, and U-Turn. Second one being Rage Fist, Drain Punch, Bulk Up, and Protect. And then also the Bulk Up Protect set can also have like a Lumberry if you're a Terra Water type. Safety Goggles Fire type, so you can get burned or slept. There's a lot of options there, you know, and it makes Annihilate like incredibly potent. And the only thing that hurts it a little bit is the current haze meta. But I think that if you support it properly, like it could definitely be a really annoying Pokemon that like can do well. So Rotom Wash. So Rotom Wash to me is actually probably like consistent on most teams or consistent on some teams. It's kind of like in that middle area. So I think Rotom is actually a really solid Pokemon. The only issue it has right now is just that like there are some things that can kind of snipe it. So for example, Meowscarada and Breloom. That being said though, it's like unique resistances that it has, like, or unique resistances and weaknesses are just really good. And like Levitate plus like electric type is obviously really good. You can take advantage of that. What's really interesting about it is it's actually been typically using like Terra Fire, which actually pairs really well with this Water Electric original typing, because then it's like, okay, you remove your only grass weakness you had, and all the other weaknesses of fire are covered by Rotom Wash's typing originally, so they'd have to make a call into you for the most part, right? And like you still have Levitate to support your fire type, so it's actually a really cool combination. Dragapult. So Dragapult is a Pokemon I could see being specific, like on specific teams and working well. I think that Dragapult is really underexplored in this metagame, and like fast Shadow Ball, like fast Draco Meteor, or even fast Dragon Darts is really cool. I think people need to definitely explore this Pokemon more before they can fully rule it out as like a good option. Alright, Cerulege. So Cerulege to me is like consistent on some teams. I just feel like the main problem that Cerulege has is like it really only does one thing, which is bulk up, Bitter Blade, Shadow Sneak, Protect. It's okay in that role. It did win the Limitless tournament, but it notably had like some really bad placements besides that. It didn't really have any others. So it does work on some teams, but the issue with it is that it's like a very like telegraphed role. So it can kind of be taken advantage of if it's not on the right team. Oranguru to me, so I wanted to specifically put this in the could work on specific teams. As I said, I think Trick Room is underexplored, and it's one of those archetypes that I think, you know, can use a little bit of work. And I think that Oranguru might be one of the catalysts to really bring that about. But obviously Oranguru hasn't seen much play, which is why it's on the could work in specific teams category. Like I think that when we see a bit more from it, then we can kind of make that decision whether or not it deserves to be higher. But right now it hasn't really achieve that. Palafin is a Pokemon that I actually think is like pretty like good. It actually had a lot of surprise placements in the most recent giant tournament that we had, so I feel like it's actually like not a bad Pokemon in general. I'd argue it's probably a little bit worse than Meowscarada, but I do think that actually has some potential if it's utilized the right way, and I do really look forward to seeing more like Palafin teams, because I think Palafin actually has like a decent enough like capabilities where it can be used properly. Tauros, Fire Tauros, I'm going to put in the could work on specific teams category. This can go the same for Water Tauros, but I'd probably put Water Tauros like a little bit higher towards the top. So like, basically, Fire Tauros is like worse Arcanine almost. And Intimidate's not good right now, pretty much, so that's why it's like down here. It does have an Anger Point gimmick as well next to Frost Breath, which is why it's like there, but for the most part it's not super great. Now Water Tauros is a different story. So Water Tauros I actually think can do a bit more. So if we look at Water Tauros, you have Raging Bull, right, which destroys screens. You turn it into a water type attack. You have Close Combat, and then you know your last move is kind of up to whatever you feel like your best physical move can be. You can really run like a variety of different moves. You can even run like Rock Slide. And then even having like an Assault Vest or a Choice Band with this could be pretty threatening. Because you could be putting out a bunch of damage. You have a decent attack, a decent speed tier. Like, it's actually not a necessarily bad concept. So for that reason, like, that's why I have it in that category. Pelipper. So Pelipper, to me, is a Pokemon that definitely, like, could work on specific teams. Like, Rain is good. You know, Rain is definitely a really solid, like, option. And I think that it can fit on certain teams, especially next to stuff like Palafin, for example, or, like, strong water types. I think that my biggest thing with it is just like it is very linear, and like it is a good tailwind setter in like its own regards, but it can be outpaced by like a lot of other Pokemon in the metagame, which makes it susceptible to just like two fast attackers. So that's kind of what holds it back from being like a consistent on some teams category. Glamora goes into the could work on specific teams. Besides that one Japanese team that won a big tournament, Glamora's like really seen no play. Also to note, like Glamora won like one of the first tournaments, and it was also like Paradox Pokemon allowed, so that could also change the metagame for it a little bit. Rotom Heat is a really solid like Rotom appliance in my opinion. It's like pretty on par with Rotom Wash. Basically, like, the only thing I think holds it back from being above Rotom Wash is Rotom Wash has, like, a Will-O-Wisp Helping Hand set. It has a Nasty Plot set. And, like, don't get me wrong, like, Rotom Heat has these options as well. It's just, like, more specific to a team, whereas, like, Rotom Wash seems more generally splashable due to the lack of, like, good general waters on teams. I'm actually probably going to up Grim the more I look at this, because I really feel like Grim actually is, like, balance seems like main hope for like being a more defensive like archetype and not having to be offensive, so it's gonna go up there. Abomasnow to me is like it could work on specific teams. I'm gonna put next to Cell Titan. Actually, I'll probably put Tauros below like Titan and the Glamora, but basically like Abomasnow is like a really good like snow setter. It's the only one actually in the format, so it's the only one that can actually do that. And then on top of that, what it's going to do is obviously set Aurora Veil. And if you take advantage of Aurora Veil, you know, the bulk is actually pretty meaningful. So it deserves at least that spot because on the right team, it could be really good. Rotom Mow. So it's not on the level of Rotom Heat and Rotom Wash, but it does have some potential. So for me, that does go down into the could work on specific teams category. And it gets access to all the same support moves besides it being a Leaf Storm on. It's just because of the grass type, it's not as good as like some of the other Rotom appliances. All right, so Scovillain actually like has like, I don't know. I feel like it has a opportunity to be good because of like its unique combination as like a chlorophyll rage powder redirector with spicy extract. Spicy extract plus mirror herb is actually really cute. I got by that a while ago. If you look at my Twitter, I have like a post that I posted where like basically like they spicy extracted me to like lower my defense and up my attack, and then a mirror herb Mence copied my attack boost and then breaking swipe me, right? Or mirror herb roaring moon, sorry. And it breaking swipe me and just took me out. So like I feel like there's some cute like combinations you could pull off with that, along with it being like a rage powder Pokemon. So for that reason, it's in the could work on specific teams. Gengar I actually think is really underrated right now. Fast Icy Wind, potential Trick Room, you know, Shadow Ball, Sludge Bomb is good coverage. I actually think it's consistent on some teams. I would even argue that it could maybe move up depending on how much it's used. But I definitely think Gengar is a Pokemon that has a lot of potential. Gastrodon. So Gastrodon to me is a Pokemon that could work on specific teams. Unfortunately, Gastrodon is a little bit held back in this format, mostly because of the problems of its, you know, of its like overall middling stats. And like realistically, when Gastro is good, it's when Storm Drain is good. And like Storm Drain isn't the most good right now because there aren't as many like offensive water types running around, and even the ones that are kind of offensive running around, like for example Dondozo, like they don't usually run water moves anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? Now, overall, I'd say that Gastrodon is still a pretty decently solid Pokemon. It's just that more so it is, like, not the level of good it was in previous metagames. Goodra, to me, is, like, a... probably in, like, the could work on specific teams. I'm actually going to lower Fire Tauros down to barely usable. Because I just don't think it actually deserves a spot over, like, Arcanine. But I would say that, like, Goodra does have a gimmick with, like, Acid Armor, Water type, Sap Sipper. That's, like, kind of a cute role for it to just, like, set in the field. But the problem is, like, I don't really know if it does anything except for set in the field, which is why it's so low. Sableye, I actually think has the potential to, like, really be good. I could even see this going up to consistent on some teams. A lot of people fixate on, yeah, I'm going to put it in consistent on some teams. A lot of people fixate on Grimmsnarl right now because Grimmsnarl is, like, obviously screens. Like, it's our normal screen setter. But Sableye actually sports, like, a neutral type to Goldingo. And Goldingo is, like, the most potent, like, attacker with, like, Make It Rain. So it actually kind of makes sense that, like, you would use a Sableye because, like, when you light screen, you're actually, like, covered on your bases, right? As well, too, you know, it also has access to Will-O-Wisp, which is a huge option, Fake Out, Foul Play, Quash. Like, there's a lot of good utility there that you can take advantage of with Sableye. All right, King Gambit. So King Gambit, to me, like, probably fell down a little bit then from where it was. I think it gets in the consistent on most teams, or, like, on some teams category. King Gambit's still a really cool option. I just think that the only reason why it's fallen off a little bit is because King Gambit's primary, like, function on, like, the team I used to get second place, it was using Paradox Pokemon, right? So, like, basically, I was using King Gambit as, like, a Terra Water to pressure, like, Chi-Yu, or not Chi-Yu, sorry. Yeah, Chi-Yu. And I was using it to pressure, you know, opposing Tyranitar. I was using it to pressure opposing Chen Pao, Dragonite, like, those kind of Pokemon. So basically the main issue that came out of that was just, I don't know, it just felt like King Gambit is like not performing that role anymore. If anything, I think that now it's moving more towards a role to check like the Gold Dango teams running around. So if you can find a good way to build around that, then I think King Gambit can be definitely good on some teams. Also, Supreme Overlord is better right now because of lack of Intimidate. All right, Mimikyu to me goes on like could work on specific teams, and like this is like a very, very like close to the border of like being barely usable. I think Mimikyu is pretty weak this gen. It's just like not super phenomenal with its kit. You know, having a Trick Room that can't be stopped pretty much is nice, but it's just like not enough for it. You know, it just doesn't do anything besides that. Scizor to me, so like I actually don't think Scizor is that bad. I think it's just like it could work on specific teams kind of deal. It's just a little bit underpowered compared to the rest of the metagame right now, or like people at least haven't found like the best use for it. And I think that like one underexplored set could be like Choice Band U-Turn, Choice Band Bullet Punch, like that could be something, but we'll have to see how that kind of pans out. Skeledirge is a Pokemon I actually think is I would probably actually argue it's probably consistent on some teams. Like it works with screens specifically really well. Honestly, like now that I think about it, yeah, I still am gonna keep screens on here, but you know, Skeledirge is one of those Pokemon who like incredibly benefit off of it and like can be used on other teams as well. It's a really good late game win con with like Unaware and like Slack Off. And you could Terra into like any type to like kind of wall your opponent. Usually it's Fairy, but sometimes you can do other types. Like I did Grass, for example, for my team. But like, yeah, basically like you just have like great walling potential at the end of the game. And like, that's really tough for an opponent to deal with. Kilowattrel is a Pokemon that I feel like goes into the could work on specific teams category. It is a really fast Tailwinder. The only thing is the two other Tailwinders are priority, which is like not great for Kilowattrel. And it does get like this cute ability called Wind Power where it gets powered up with Tailwind. And also it gets competitive, which pairs nicely with Garchomp, which you can take advantage of as well. So that's just one thing you can do. Ferrodraft to me goes into the could work on specific teams category. It like has its uses. It's just very like okay, I would say. Like Armatail's good. But as a Trick Room setter, it can be kind of outclassed sometimes. As an attacker, it's not necessarily bad, but then you have to kind of put a speed in Girafarig or Ferrodraft, sorry. Which is kind of awkward for it sometimes. But it's not terrible. Like its ability is pretty good. Gardevoir, I definitely put in the could work on specific teams, but towards the bottom. Like Fast Scarf Gardevoir could be really cool on some teams. But the main issue that has right now is it's a Goldingo meta, so it's pretty rough using it right now. Houndstone. So Houndstone, I think, could work on specific teams as well. It's not a bad Sandmon. You know, Last Respects, Fast Will-O-Wisp, Play Rough, like, it has potential, you know. It's not amazing by any means, and, like, it won't work on every team, but it does have some like, neat tools. Lilligant, I would also kind of put in the could work on specific teams. It really only works next to Torkoal, and like honestly, I don't even think it's that good of a Torkoal partner anymore. I would say that Lilligant in general is just like kind of held back by the fact of like so linear that like it can be really abusable. All right, Armorosh. So Armorosh to me goes into the consistent on most teams. I actually think Armorosh has a lot of potential as a Pokemon. Like basically, Special Fire close combat is like pretty broken. As well too, like having Expanding Force on like when in a gen where like no one else has Expanding Force obviously is a really good like kind of buff for you. And then on top of that as well, also just having Trick Room and Wide Guard, which are really good utility moves, are just amazing. So it does get access to some really cool tools. I feel like we're gonna get hit like all the top tiers at once, to be honest, because of the way like stuff is like building up, which is really funny. Dragonite. So Dragonite to me is like a consistent on some teams kind of Pokemon. People might be like, oh, it should be higher, but like it's kind of like the Gallade thing. Like it kind of got carried by like the rank 1 team to like be one of these Pokemon that gets in this category. I don't think it's a bad Pokemon. I think it has some potential. It's just I think it's a little bit overhyped from how it's doing right now. I'd probably put it in like the okay category. Like normal type extreme speed is really cool. And it is like a good niche for it, but I don't think it's like crazy on top, you know, like I don't think it's like a top tier mon. Gyarados unfortunately has had a bit of a fall from grace. I actually think it's dropped down to consistent on some teams. Intimidate's just not a good ability right now, and like as you can see, like Gyarados is getting punished for it. That's gonna be the same case with Arcanine. These Pokemon have just like kind of lost a lot of their utility and like, you know, their power in the metagame. Volcarona to me goes down into the could work on specific teams towards like kind of the bottom. Volcarona's kit's really cool, and I think it is good at walling Goldingo. Actually, I'd probably put on like top, could work on specific teams. Like, it could work on, definitely on like the right teams. It's just the main issue that has is like its typing, and like if you make it a defensive Volcarona that's meant to be like a bulky defensive utilization with like Terra Water, that could be really strong, but it is like a questionable Pokemon sometimes in terms of like what it can do. All right, next up is Talonflame. So Talonflame to me actually goes into like the it probably goes into like the consistent on some teams category. It's not as splashable as Murkrow is, for example, but it's still really good. It is a good Tailwind setter, and it definitely can be used a lot. So for that reason, like, Talonflame's there. Also has like pretty decent like offensive capabilities when you run like Sharp Peak on it, for example, with like Brave Bird. So you can like snipe Amoonguses, which is really cool. Goldingo. So Goldingo is going to be our first S tier Pokemon, or like top tier threat. It's a really good Pokemon right now. Good as Gold is a really broken ability. You can't get status by anything. And then on top of that, like, you also just do so much damage with Specs Make It Rain. It's like absolutely incredible. Like, and it pairs so well with Murkrow, which is like really prominent in the format right now. And it's literally created like one of the most dominant cores in early meta for this format. So yeah. Toadscruel. Toadscruel is a Pokemon that I could see working on specific teams. I think having Trick Room, Rage Powder, and Spore all in one mon is actually really cool. It does also get access to Earth Power, which it can take advantage of. So like Toadscruel definitely has some potential there. It has some really cool options it can take advantage of. Its ability does hurt it a little bit though, I will say that. Torkoal. So Torkoal to me is like a consistent on some teams kind of deal. Even though this may look a little bit weird considering Torkoal didn't really have any good placements, I still think it's a really good Pokemon. I just think people are using it the wrong way. And like even on like Trick Room teams, like they're probably using it the wrong way. So I would look forward to like hopefully seeing someone use Torkoal a little bit better. Because I think that if you continue to focus on like, oh, Torkoal can only be like a Trick Room attacker, then like it's not going to function well. Because that's like exactly how people are exploiting it right now. Sylveon to me, like, I actually genuinely thought this thing was going to be a lot better, but because of Goldingo meta, like, it's actually being held back a lot. I'd probably put it in, like, the consistent on some teams category, only because I think that, like, it can be good. It's just, like, held back a little bit by, you know, some of the specific Pokemon running around right now. I don't think it's terrible, right? I do think it's, like, a solid enough option that you can take advantage of. Garganacl as well goes down into the consistent on some teams category. I feel like Garganacl is just like okay, you know. It is a decent setup option, but like Goldingo is a big problem for it. And like even on teams that don't have Goldingo, like Garganacl is getting clear smogged a lot by Amoonguss, and that actually gives it a lot of issues in terms of like trying to get set up or trying to get like good damage. So that's a thing to keep in mind, you know. Garchomp. So Garchomp is a top tier threat. It's a really solid Pokemon in my opinion. It just pairs really well with the Murkrow Goldingo Hydreigon core. And it's just an incredibly strong like damaging option. And it's just the best ground type in the format. And ground types are really good, right? So whenever you have like the title of best ground type in the format, you're going to be like eating good, I guess is the way I would put it, right? Also, I'm going to reorganize this for Dundozo Tatsugiri near top. But yeah, I just think it's a very, very powerful Pokemon. Corviknight. So Corviknight to me actually is like a consistent on some teams thing. So I think it's definitely lower than like these Pokemon because like it wasn't seen so much within Top Cut. But I think that, or not even just Top Cut, but just like, you know, in general, I would say that like for Corviknight specifically, it does have like really good capabilities of even walling like common Dundozo teams because they run like Order Up and Earthquake. So you can kind of wall those pretty comfortably. And then on top of that, you have Iron Defense Body Press. You could even just do Bulk Up, Brave Bird, Taunt, like Tailwind, or like, sorry, Roost Tailwind. Like you have some sets there that you can utilize that are just interesting. That being said, though, I do think Corviknight does have a bit of like 4 move slot syndrome where it wants to run like 5 moves, but like it has to pick 4. Hydreigon. So Hydreigon, very solid. It'd probably be another like top tier threat for me. It just has a lot of potent Terra types and it's one of the strongest Pokemon offensively. And paired with Murkrow, I think that it's just like an incredibly solid Pokemon, right? Now, you guys might notice that even though I'm talking about a lot about Murkrow, that like I'm not putting in top tier threats. Murkrow is literally the sum of its parts almost. Like without Goldingo, Garchomp, and Hydreigon, I don't think Murkrow would be near as good. So that's why Murkrow is like 1 tier below. But I definitely think that like these 3 Pokemon are like incredibly powerful in the format. Tyranitar is a Pokemon that has honestly fallen off pretty hard. I feel like a good, consistent on some teams would be fine for it. I could even see it dropping even lower, to be honest. It's been severely hurt by all the top Pokemon running around. And like it definitely has some niche within the metagame, but it's definitely like hurting a little bit. All right. Vivillon is probably down in the could work on specific teams category. It's a fast Rage Powder, Sleep Powder mon, so maybe on Trick Room. Then we have Amoonguss here. Amoonguss is going to be our top tier. Clear Smog, Rage Powder, good Terra types it can turn into. It's just an incredibly solid Pokemon. We're probably going to move some consistent on some teams up to consistent on most teams, by the way. But we're just getting a feel for it. But yeah, Amoonguss is like incredibly strong. It just has a lot of good support options. Can put on a bunch of pressure. So. Alright, Arcanine. So Arcanine, unfortunately, another Pokemon that's really been demoted since last time we talked about it. Intimidate's just not good right now. Clear Amulet's running around too much. It's just incredibly difficult to deal with. And I think that that's holding it back a substantial amount, right? So we'll have to see how that kind of develops from there. But yeah. As well, too, we have Bronzong. So Bronzong, to me, is a Pokemon that I could definitely see working on specific teams. I think the Trick Room option is really cool. And I think Iron Defense Body Press is still good. The only problem is like Goldango, Hydreigon are running around right now, which are two really good mons at dealing with it. Then we have Mousehold. Mousehold to me is a like Pokemon that could work on like some teams. Mousehold has like Technician Population Bomb, which is actually like incredibly potent. Oh, hold on. Right, sorry about that. I got a call like mid video. Basically, yeah, I think that when it comes to, when it comes to like these Pokemon, I'm probably going to restructure this tier a little bit because I feel like putting them into the blanket statement of consistent on most teams, like kind of limits it. So consistent is probably what I'm going to change this tier to. And then consistent on some teams is fair, right? And I think we can kind of use that category a bit better. Then we have Palmet. Palmet I'd probably put in the... I'd actually probably put it in the could work on specific teams, although I could see it moving up, because I actually do think that Palmet with Revival Blessing, fast Fake Out, fast Close Combat, fast Double Shock is actually really cool. But yeah. We're going to move up Rotom to consistent. We're going to move up Rotom Heat to consistent. We're going to move up Skeledirge to consistent. I like Grimmsnarl up in the consistent category. Talonflame I'd say is still consistent, right? And I'd probably put Kingambit, Gengar, Meowscarada up there. And then after that, then it kind of goes down into the rest of the Pokemon, right? I do think that right now, like, these are the Pokemon that probably have the most potential. And we'll have to see how the format develops from here. But this does seem to be, like, kind of more of the preferred Pokemon that are, like, doing well, right? As well, too, I want to note, like, Cerulege being down here. Like, Cerulege is still good. It's just, like, it only was really good on that one team. Whereas, like, these Pokemon, I see them being good, like, more consistently. I actually, you know what? I'd consider putting Mousehold up there because Mousehold's actually really good with Technician Population Bomb. So, yeah. Going over the list. Top tier threats. Goldango, Garchomp, Hydreigon, Amoonguss. Really good redirection. Strong special attacker. Dragon type. Strong physical attacker. Dragon type. Strong steel type. Goldango. Strong spread move. Like, it's one of the best Pokemon in the game by far. Tatsugiri, Dondozo, really good setup. Armoro's really good utility with Wide Guard, Armor Cannon. It has Expanding Force as well, which is pretty potent. It's Trick Room. Annihilate with being able to run Final Gambit sets, being able to run Bulk Up sets. Murkrow, really good Tailwind setter. The best one in the format, probably. Then you have the two Rotom forms, which are just really solid doing their own thing with either specs or just damage output. You have Skeledirge, which is a really good endgame option in this metagame. Then you have Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl is able to set screens. It's the best defensive Pokemon pretty much in this metagame right now. And then you have Talonflame, which can go for fast Tailwinds. It's a good alternative Murkrow, pretty much, and it does more damage than Murkrow. Kingambit actually seems like it'd be really solid into the current metagame because Hydreigon and Goldango have trouble breaking it, but it also could have issues with some other stuff in the metagame, so you have to kind of consider that. Gengar, really underrated potential, has the potential for like fast Icy Winds, fast Sludge Bomb, fast Shadow Ball. Also, too, you get Haze, which you can use to shut down Dondozo, Tatsugiri, or even Trick Room and Speed Control. Meowscarada, really good, always crits. It's pretty much like Urshifu Light in this format. And like combined with Overgrow can get like some pretty ridiculous damage. And then Technician Population Bomb Mousehold is just really strong. It also has some support options with like Follow Me, Helping Hand, can use Friend Guard. So I just think those are incredibly good tools for it. And then, as we go down, there's, I talked about the rest of Pokemon. But I did want to talk about Pokemon which I felt were like worth discussing in this top tier. So you guys will notice like the tier list has changed quite a bit from like last time, and like it might even change quite a bit going into next time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the updated tier list every like month or two, just to kind of get an idea of like how the metagame works. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to let me know. And also make sure to let me know if you agree or disagree with some of my picks. Let me know what you guys would like to see next in the next videos. And as always, guys, thank you so much for support. See you in the next one. Peace.